Hi everyone, I hope you're well. Now I've had a bit of a break, a much needed break after a busy spring and summer on the Grow Paradise nursery. And surprisingly, it's been a really mild autumn so far. We had a few days, maybe 4 or 5 days, that it dropped down to about 4 or 3 degrees Celsius. And a lot of us around the country were getting a bit nervous about bringing some of these tropical and exotic plants into areas that are protected, like our greenhouses or our conservatories. But in my tropical style garden here, which is in USDA Gardening Zone 9, everything, as you can see, is still looking really, really good. Now, there are a few plants that I have started to protect. So in this video, I'm just going to give you a quick look around our tropical style garden that is still thriving. We are now in November in the UK and it's looking this good. And I'll show you some of the plants that I've started to protect. But actually, they're not really about temperature. A lot of it is about rain, because in the UK, in autumn and as we head into winter, it does rain a lot. So I'll start with the plant that I think was probably catching most of your eyes at the start of this video, and that's this incredible Brugmansia. Now, this is the first time I've grown this Brugmansia, and I featured it right at the start of the year. Now, I checked out on Google which Brugmansia will produce the most flowers when grown in the UK, and this is the plant that came up. This is Brugmansia cross-cubensis and a cultivar called Charles Grimaldi, and it has lived up to that reputation. Now, these were grown from tiny little cuttings at the start of the year. This is only 2 plants, and you can see how many buds we've still got even in November. And there's all these flowers and buds and more flowers to follow. So long as it stays mild and the wind and wet doesn't destroy these flowers, we should have loads and loads of blooms still to come. And as you can imagine, this part of the garden, this Paradise Patio project, smells incredible of an evening and as nighttime rolls in, which now inevitably is earlier and earlier as winter encroaches. About 4 o'clock, these flowers start to pump out such a heady fragrance. But there must be easily 20 or 30 blooms here. And now these are just grown in these large plastic containers inside of a slightly more ornamental ceramic pot. And I use plastic containers because it prevents them drying out. Ceramic is breathable, so terracotta pots, unglazed ceramic pots tend to dry out really, really quickly. So if you've got a plant like Brugmansia that need a lot of water, then using a plastic pot, a nice tough plastic pot that you can reuse for many years to come, nothing rubbish and disposable, that's going to stop it drying out really, really quick, which means that you're going to be able to keep it happy and you'll get this many blooms. And I've been feeding these with liquid tomato feed for the whole spring, the whole summer, and it's keeping the leaves green just about. But the key thing with tomato feed, because these plants are related to tomatoes, is it's encouraging all of these blooms. Such an incredible display for this time of year. It's really lifting the garden, where a few other things are starting to look a bit worse for wear. Now behind that, we've got a clematis growing. This is an evergreen clematis. This is Clematis europhylla and a cultivar called Winter Beauty. Now, I selected this because I saw it growing in a public garden somewhere, and it's got these really good jungly looking evergreen leaves. And the idea was that we'd cover this brick wall with some foliage, and it's worked really well. Now, it's actually planted in that bed there, so it's getting its roots down into the ground, which clematis love. They love to have their roots in rich soil with good drainage, but their roots cool, and then the leaves nice and warm. And on this wall, which is almost south-facing, the foliage gets so much sun during spring and summer. But not only is it evergreen, you'll see it is absolutely covered all along the stem in flower buds. This is a winter flowering clematis, and the idea here was that this area is close to the house, tends to be the areas that we enjoy more in winter, the kind of patio areas that are right by the back door. We're going to get to enjoy these winter flowers. It's crept behind this propagator here. It's creeping everywhere. We get to enjoy these winter flowers right from the view from the kitchen window and from the back door. So that's going to be good. I'll keep you updated on that as the months roll by. I expect, I think the label said it flowers from early to mid-winter, so it should be budding up, ready for those buds to open very, very soon. Then in this bed where the clematis is planted, we've still got the fuchsia blooming its socks off. This was that one we got from Hampton Court Palace. I can't remember the name, but I really like these glossy pink recurved petals contrasting with that silky purple. I'm becoming more and more a fan of fuchsia just because of their flower power, and there are so many different species rather than cultivated types that I think I'd like to have a go at. Matching that colour palette, we've still got this Madagascan Impatiens. This is Impatiens tuberosa. And it's surprising actually, it's nearly winter in the UK and we've still got these exotic plants from warm locations like Madagascar absolutely thriving in the UK. Now I've got a battle, an internal battle, because I grow plants to propagate. At some point I'm going to need to start chopping them up to take cuttings, to save seeds. But I'm also a gardener that likes to sit on the back doorstep, sit in the garden and enjoy the view. So I'm going to try and drag this out for as long as possible. A plant that lost that battle for propagation is this Brazilian plume flower. This is Justicia carnea. But you'll notice that even though this is a tender tropical plant, I haven't dug it out yet because really, in my experience, it will take temperatures down to 5 degrees Celsius for short periods of time with no harm at all. So by leaving it in, I'm letting it recover, there's side shoots coming out, and that's just going to allow it to kind of get a bit more momentum before I dig it up and containerize it, stick it in a pot to bring it in the greenhouse and protect it from the real cold of winter. Now let's just take a moment also to appreciate this magnolia. I really think Magnolia grandiflora is a plant that more of us should try in our tropical style gardens because it's completely hardy. It's got these glossy evergreen leaves. This is a cultivar called Ferruginea. So many plants that have that name are selected for their rusty coloration, either on the flowers or on the leaves. And this has this really nice golden, coppery gold leaf underside. And the sun sets over here, so that beams across and illuminates that golden underside. And it looks so good of an evening just before the flowers on that Brugmansia start pumping their fragrance. So it's a really nice combo. And then you might have clocked that we've also left some of the cannas out. Now this is the last two that I've left out. Canna Cleopatra with these gorgeous streaked leaves and Canna Tropicana Gold, which sometimes goes by other names. Now these are in containers, so I can just move them into the greenhouse when conditions get too wet. Now I say wet, not cold, because I'm in USDA Gardening Zone 9, I'm not worried about the cold. They'll survive. We don't get that severe cold weather, but the rhizomes, the underground parts of this plant, will rot in the cold and wet. So I'm just going to move those pots, tuck them underneath a bench, keep them dry through winter, and then I can start watering again in spring to bring them back to life. And this baby little T-Rex, Tetrapanax, this has been growing in a pot and I've just been moving it around for the foliage. I might stick it in the ground, but I don't always have space for plants like this. So we'll see whether I do or not. Maybe this one will be up for sale. It's a nice big plant. And if we come down here, we've got Salvia recovering because I've propagated from this. This is Salvia Amistad. And Geranium Roseanne still pushing out some flowers, but looking a bit messy down at the base now. So this will get a good hard chop back. If it's mild, it might regrow, push out some buds just before winter, but then it will die back to below ground, become dormant in winter, and then regrow again in spring. Then in this display on the Paradise Patio project, where everything is growing in containers, we have some more Brugmansia. These I've lost the label for, so they've got no ID. These are looking a bit worse for wear. I haven't been feeding these quite so much. These are going to be chopped up very soon, and all of the sections of stem will be used for cuttings so that we'll have lots to sell on the nursery. I've got photos of what the flowers look like, but as with the other one, there's a couple more buds just pushing out flowers here, so I'm not going to rush. I'm going to enjoy that display while it's still mild. Now the idea with propagating plants is you start as late in the season as possible so you get to enjoy the display, but you do it while there's still some warmth, because that warmth is going to help those roots start growing and help your plant grow on. Obviously you can use artificial warmth like a propagator or a heat mat. Down here is Woodwardia radicans, the giant European chain fern. Now this stays evergreen as long as winters are mild, but this is doing quite well, and it's sitting in a very dirty looking bowl of water which is catching the leaves that are dropping off of the Brugmansias above. You might be surprised to see that I've still got my Begonia luxurians out. This is that palm-leaved begonia. Now it's looking a bit beaten up. That's because it's growing in a very small pot tucked behind that rock there. It's dried out a couple of times, but we have quite strong coastal winds here, and when it blows around in this patio area, it's blown these over, so I have to keep picking them up, which tends to happen at this time of year. Plants get a bit too big for their pots, a bit top heavy, so the wind can tip them over. The Abutilons, which have been flowering for many, many, many months, are still flowering their socks off. I don't think they're going to stop. As long as the temperatures stay above 5 degrees, they keep growing and they keep flowering. I like the height they've got to this year. People say you need to keep pinching out the tops to encourage bushier growth, and I didn't do it purely because I forgot. But look, they're nice and tall now, so we're getting these hibiscus-like flowers right at the top of the display that in the coming days are going to combine with these Brugmansia blooms really nicely. Now down just a bit lower here are some Aeoniums. I can't remember the cultivars of these. I think one of them is Cyclops. They have been in a constant battle this year with snails. There's one, look. They just love to eat these fleshy leaves. There's a couple of plants, both growing in pots. Now these are the plants that I'm going to prioritise protecting before anything else, because I'm not worried about temperature with these quite so much. Anything above 5 degrees is absolutely fine. It's the wet. For two reasons really. The wet encourages the snails and slugs to mobilise, and they'll make their way up this stem and they'll eat the whole rosette of leaves. But the wet also sits on the leaves and causes them to rot. Now in the summer, the wet is absolutely fine because the temperatures are high enough that the water will evaporate away. But at this time of year, they just don't dry out and it causes quite bad rot. So probably in the next week or so, depending on the weather conditions, which is always the case, they might be moved into the greenhouse and then they'll get protection from rain. We've got another Begonia luxurians here, which is in a pot, stuffed on top of this ornament here. And then the good, tough evergreen foliage of a young Trachycarpus fortunii palm, which again is growing in a pot. And then there's a couple of pots. This is what I mean, look. These were Aeoniums that have been slugged, but they are producing side shoots, so I might protect them and let them grow back. And at the back is a Pseudopanax, one of those New Zealand evergreen shrubs. This is mower's toes, because when it's young, each leaf resembles the toe of the mower bird, the extinct mower bird. This is actually quite good. It's a nice backdrop evergreen tree for this area. I'm really conscious that as the seasons kind of roll by, all of these herbaceous plants like the begonia, the Aeoniums, the cannas, these big Brugmansia, they're all going to get protected or get chopped up and propagated. So I need to build up a stack of evergreen plants to keep this display looking good, because I want this area to look really nice throughout the year. So at the moment, we've got the evergreen clematis on the wall, the evergreen Magnolia grandiflora, the evergreen Pseudopanax there, evergreen Euphorbia cross-pasteuri John Phillips, Trachycarpus, and on this side, which will be moved to that display, I've got the really nice narrow leaves here of Podocarpus henkelii. I've managed to get hold of 2,000 seeds for this, but they might be a bit too big to ship. So yeah, I'm going to see if I could grow on a few of those, perhaps not 2,000, because I'll have a forest of Podocarpus and no space to grow them on. Actually, let's have a look at this bed. Let me just close this gate. So these really nice leaves are from our Geranium madurense, or the Madeiran cranesbill. This is a gigantic geranium, and there are two forms that I know of. There's the pink flowering species and then a cultivar called Guernsey White. And I grew both about a year ago, and I can't remember which one this was. I lost the label, so I've planted it, and we will see what colour it flowers. It should flower next year, so we'll find out. I'm thinking it might be the pink one because of the colour of the leaf petioles here. That's the leaf stems, but we'll see. I really like it just for the foliage. That dissected glossy foliage looks really good, and for me it stays evergreen even in a hard frost. The leaves freeze solid and curl up and you start panicking, but they always bounce back. Above that is our Brassioopsis mitis, which I think I'm becoming braver and braver. I might chop up this stem and see if I can propagate some, because so many of you are asking for this plant. And I'm lucky enough to have two, so I can experiment with one and just hope for the best. We've got another fuchsia here. This is Fuchsia Thalia, or Fuchsia triphylla Thalia, and it has these really nice clusters of long tubular flowers. And I'm surprised this is actually still flowering at this time of year. Another plant that's really good for partial shade with bright flowers. It flowers a lot more with more light, but it does flower in shade. We've still got our Mexican cigar plant, Cuphea ignea, producing flowers down here. I've been taking a lot of cuttings, so we'll have lots of these to sell in the coming months. More Fuchsia Thalia flowers here. You can see the canards are starting to get a bit worse for wear, the ones that have been planted out, because we have had those colder nights. So some of these herbaceous plants are starting to struggle. And then up here, I'll take a step back, is my seed-grown Musa cheesemanii, or Cheeseman's banana. This is a high altitude banana, so it should have quite good cold tolerance. This is the first year it's planted out. I've been speaking to people online that have got this as well, and theirs are getting too big to overwinter, so they're thinking about planting it out. This is an experiment for me in my gardening zone, in the climate where I'm growing. So if mine survives, then all of you in similar locations can have a go and experiment with yours as well. And then this large-leaved Salvia serboana, the vine-leaved salvia. The flower displays are finished now. Usually I can save seeds, but this one's growing in a pot because all season long I couldn't decide where to plant it, and we were away for a few days recently and the pot blew over, so all the seeds blew out. So this year I've not got any seeds to grow, but not to worry. Now our golden Indian bean tree up there, which has been incredible this year, we cut it right back to here. I actually did a video on how to prune trees, and this was cut back, which has kind of encouraged it to produce enormous golden leaves all year long, which again looked good. As I say, the sun shines from this side of the garden, and as it's setting, it's just shining through the leaves, so they were really, really glowing. Really chuffed with that. And it will get a hard prune again, because we're in a small garden, so I need to try and keep everything relative to the space. I don't want anything getting so big that we are kind of drowned in shade, and I don't want to be doing the same for the neighbours. So it's chopping everything back each autumn or spring, depending on the plants, and then getting it to this height in one season and just maintaining that. This is just high enough for me to feel like I'm in amongst the plants rather than looking down on them. Now, one plant that's looking phenomenal at the moment, and this is why I love growing these. This is Fatsia japonica variegata. So it's not your spider's web form. This one has kind of blotches of variegation around the leaf edges. Sometimes you get really big variegated sections like this. Sometimes it's much more subtle. But at this time of year, being an ivy relative, it's producing nectar-rich flowers, which look like little fireworks, almost perfectly timed for fireworks night in November. They are a magnet for pollinating insects. So when the sun is shining on this in the morning, it is covered in bees and wasps and the butterflies that are still around. So it's really providing, and following the flowers after pollination, you get dark purple berries that the birds absolutely love. So we leave the flowers on, we let the berries grow because it will provide food for passing wildlife, which is a huge part of gardening for me. I don't want to just garden for myself. I really enjoy seeing wildlife visit the garden. Then behind that, these big long canes are our Sambucus nigra, and this is a cultivar called Blue Sheen. And this dark leaf contrasted so beautifully against those golden Indian bean tree leaves there all season long. But it did grow into a monster. That's probably been in the ground for about 3 years now. And no matter how hard we chop it back, that was, well, you can see the sort of height I try and get it back to. It produced so much growth. Now I'll probably cut it back a bit in autumn just to stop wind rot. I don't want the branches to snap in winter, but then come spring, I'll cut it back even harder so that all of the new growth comes from a sensible height. Otherwise it's going to get out of hand. Some tender plants that are still out include our bromeliads. Now, a lot of these are Neoregelia cultivars that are just growing in a mossy ball that I tie around the branches of this cherry laurel. Bulk standard plant, but great for creating a wind barrier for the rest of the garden. and it's evergreen, so it's creating structure through winter, but it is the perfect host for tying epiphytes like this. We've also got Tillandsia usnioides, the Spanish moss. That's fine. That one was out all winter long, and that took sub-zero temperatures, and it's still growing. I think it helps tucked under that canopy there. Keeps the temperature a little bit higher. It's a nice warm microclimate. Another sacrificial plant we've got is this, Grisselenia littoralis. Now, littoralis means something along the lines of coastal or close to the sea, which means it's very, very salt tolerant. And you can see there's a bit of scorch on the leaf there, but that's okay. It's a bulk standard plant. It's nothing that I'm too precious about, but as it gets above the fence line here, it's creating the perfect wind buffer to prevent salt-laden winds coming through the garden and sort of ripping through all of the plants that I'm more precious about. And let's have a look at this lower layer here. Now, this bed I've not really done that much to this year. I planted a few begonias. I did a video planting these, but it's sort of, everything's popped up, everything that was perennial, and it's looked after itself, but I'm getting the urge to change things again. You know what I'm like. So maybe I'll try something a bit different next year. Now, this edge of the Acorus grass is evergreen, and it always looks so good. And I just love the way it softens the path, especially contrasting against that quartz steel edging for the nursery side of things. We've got this ground cover of Saxifraga stolonifera, which always looks a bit worse for wear after summer, but as the temperature cools down and we get more moisture, it pushes out lots of new leaves. Really nice foliage from the evergreen Fatsia polycarpa, that cultivar called Green Fingers. This is Begonia grandis. This is Evansiana alba, and these seed heads are swelling. So each one of these will be full of thousands and thousands of tiny dust-like seeds. So I'll save a few of these and try and grow some seeds for the nursery, or plants I should say. And then these are those new begonias. These were really popular on the online shop. I think we were one of the first to bring these into the country. This is part of the Luna series from a breeder in the States. This is a phenomenal leaf. I absolutely love it. Look at that rich underside. You've got this dark black colour, and they all produce really, really nice pink flowers. So these flowers here belong to this one, which is Sterling Moon. Really, really attractive speckled leaves, silver mottling with the red underside. Nice thick fleshy root zones. The key thing here is these plants have been claimed to be very, very cold tolerant. They'll die back to ground level, but provided with good drainage, this foliage should regrow bigger and better every single year. And you do get pink flowers, like I say. This one has a really nice blue iridescence that you can catch sometimes. In the shade, you can just sort of see it shining there. And any leaves that are in bright sunlight turn a coppery colour. I absolutely love this one. This one is Dark Side of the Moon. That's everything in that bed. And then if we have a look over all of the nursery plants, we won't talk through those at the moment. I'll do that in a video coming up soon. You can see the jungle bed, which again acts as a wind buffer for the garden, but also is a really attractive tropical looking backdrop to the nursery. I feel really lucky to have so many well-established plants in such a small garden alongside our little nursery business here. Now you can see just there our biggest Brasseopsis mitis. This is probably 8 foot tall now. This is the one that was going to get the chop, because any taller than this, it's going to be open to the elements. It's going to be catching all of the wind, much like that shredded banana plant at the back there has. That's Musa basjou. That's something I'm thinking of changing. I might take the Musa basjou out. Possibly in autumn, maybe in spring, just because where it produces so many pups, plus the offsets at the base there, look, you can see one there, and then the main plant, which is absolutely enormous. It takes up so much space in what's quite a small garden and a narrow bed. And now we've got other plants really filling up their spaces. I think we can afford to lose it. This is another Pseudopanax, Pseudopanax laetus. Glossy leaves, You can tell it's related to Schefflera from that leaf arrangement there. This is evergreen so long as we get relatively mild winters. Anything, I'm going to say below -2, it gets defoliated. Everything gets frosted, it all drops off, and then you have bare stems. But now that it's gotten quite big, this is the biggest it's ever got to in the garden, I'm hoping that in those conditions, the outer leaves will get frosted, but there's enough foliage there to protect all of the growth inside, which means it will recover more next spring. The stems have also got much more woody and thick, which means that's going to protect any tissue inside if we do get cold conditions. Hopefully we don't get anything too severe. What else have we got in this? I've got my own Fatsia polycarpa, which has been in the ground and is doing really well. The leaves have actually got quite big. Look at this. Farfugium japonicum oreo maculatum. Absolute stunner. It's growing in a pot. I'm going to propagate this for the nursery, so hopefully I'll have some of these soon. You can see this has succumbed to propagation because the tips have all been cut off. This is that giant Impatiens tinctoria. And then a really good evergreen plant, our loquat tree, which I've also chopped back a bit just to open up for sunlight in the nursery. It always surprises me how fast this tree grows, but it does recover from hard pruning really, really well. And I know I talk about it a lot, but I really can't recommend this tree enough, just for big evergreen leaves. It doesn't look like something that should survive in the UK, but it does really well. And if we just scoot around here past some of the nursery plants and have a quick look at our wildlife pond that we built in a video recently. Now that loquat tree drops a lot of leaves, so I'm going to have to fish those out because I don't want the water to become stagnant and uninhabitable for any wildlife. But you can see how well it's filled in. Our ferns are filled in each corner beautifully. This little Colocasia pink china has grown on quite well. The Persicaria red dragon absolutely swamps the area, so I've tucked it back here. Again, producing flowers that the pollinators love. We've got a Brunnera there. I can't remember if that's Alexander's Great. I think it might be. Some Asarum there. Loads of dead leaves. This area needs a bit of a tidy up. But I'm really pleased with how this Saxifraga stolonifera is doing. You can see it's living up to its name, sending out stolons, which are creeping around even through the gravel and covering this area really well. Now, one thing about this area is I built the pond, and then as the nursery got really busy in spring and summer, all of these benches were covered in plants. This entire gravel area here, which needs a bit of a tidy up, was full as well. So next year I'm going to be conscious to keep this area clear so that I can go and maintain the pond and give you updates on the wildlife that's using it as well. We had a lot of dragonflies in the garden this year. I'm hoping to get some frogs and some toads back in the garden to help organically maintain the pests. We've actually managed to get by with a really, really good natural balance this year. Ladybirds, birds coming for berries and then helping with aphids and things. We've really not had to use any pesticides, which is fantastic because we try and do things the natural way as much as possible. Now, I said I've brought some plants into the greenhouse to start protecting them, and that's mostly because of the amount of rain we've been getting. It has been such a wet set of days and nights, almost Mediterranean. It can be drier during the day, and as soon as you close the curtains at night, you just hear that torrential rain hammering down in the garden. So, like I say, the succulents, a few have been brought in, so I'm just going to show you some of those. So here is a selection of aeoniums. Now these are Mediterranean plants. They like warmth. They actually like quite moist soil, but they don't like the foliage to be covered in water all the time. I think I said that earlier. So bringing them here just means they've got the cover of the glass. They're not going to be sat soaking wet in the cooler conditions. And actually aeoniums at this time of year, in the cooler conditions with shorter daylight hours, they grow more actively. So if I can prevent the leaves from rotting, we should get nice, big, healthy plants ready for selling on the nursery next spring, or perhaps in winter if they're ready a little bit earlier. And then next to those is a hybrid between Aeoniums and the alpine plants Sempervivums. So these are Semponiums. This is Semponium diamond because it's got this really nice geometric leaf form with diamond-shaped leaves. This will grow to almost dinner plate size. I've got a really nice display of these out the front of our house at the moment. The idea between hybridizing these with the alpine plants, Sempervivums, is the alpine ones are really, really good at tolerating cold conditions because they originate from the top of mountains where there's snow and ice frequently. So now they've got those genetics into this hybrid, they're said to be able to tolerate -5 on the caveat that you keep them drier. So again, they're benefiting from the glass above them, keeping the rain off, and these will grow really quickly because they're a hybrid. They've got hybrid vigor, so they're going to grow with the strong genetics they've now got much faster than straight species or cultivars of the Aeoniums will. Now, if you caught a glimpse of any of these apparatus, these aren't some secret hack I've got to maintaining plants in the greenhouse. Another thing that benefits from the protection of the glass of the roof is car cleaning cloths and a wheel cleaning brush, just because it helps them dry out. So it's a multi-purpose greenhouse. In fact, everything seems to be multi-purpose. The car doubles as a van so that I can take the plants to markets and plant fairs where I can meet all of you. The garden is a garden, but also a plant nursery. I just seem to like things that do or serve more than one purpose. But I'm not going to show you all of the greenhouse today. I'm going to do that in a separate video, so keep an eye out for that video coming up. I just sort of grabbed the camera and went for it, and I thought it was going to be a quick video, but there's actually quite a lot of plants that I've shown you. So hopefully it's inspired you to have a go at leaving some of your plants out a little bit longer. If you've already taken them in, don't worry. But the idea, for me at least, is to leave these plants out for as long as possible, because not only do I get to enjoy them for longer, plants are always happier outside as long as the conditions are within kind of their parameters where they're going to be happy. But we want to reduce the amount of time that we're going to be bringing them indoors because it's not their natural habitat. They're much happier outdoors. When you've got them indoors, they always struggle. So if we can reduce that time from 4 months through winter down to 2.5 months, I'm probably being a bit optimistic there. But the less time they're protected, the less time they're indoors, the happier and stronger they're going to be. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments section below. Hit subscribe if you found the video useful or inspiring in any way at all. Keep well, and I'll see you all in the next one.